Hello everybody, hope everyone is doing well. In the last week I've been out photographing ducks. I hadn't used my Nikon setup for a long time and I wanted to give my 500mm PF especially a run out because it's such a great lens and I haven't used it for a while. So I used my D500 and my 500mm PF and I went to some places near where I work to photograph some ducks. Now, I went out 3 times, and 2 times the light was terrible. One was really cloudy, one was actually raining, and the third time I had some sunlight. And I alternated between my Nikon stuff and my 300mm Olympus on the OM-1. So I felt it was a good chance to, talk about how these lenses do, how these setups do rather, when photographing very fast moving birds, specifically northern shovelers, the ducks that we get in Okinawa over the winter. We get other ducks, but in this particular location it just happened to be northern shovelers. So here it is. This is the D500 and the 500mm without the hood on. The hood also goes to about there. And it isn't heavy. The lens itself is not heavy, but the camera is kind of heavy. But it balances pretty well. And this is the OM-1 and the 300mm. Now the hood is already attached and it comes on. And this is definitely lighter. And it's kind of more streamlined as well because the weights kind of match perfectly. But both are very hand holdable. This one, the Nikon setup is a 750mm equivalent because it's 500mm on a crop sensor, and this is a 600mm equivalent because it's a micro four thirds sensor. So I could get closer with the Nikon setup, so the background is more blurred out on those shots. In terms of weight, they both feel great in the hand and they're both very hand holdable. So both are really good in terms of a relatively lightweight setup for birds in flight. Now, I don't really want this to be a comparison like which setup is better because the Nikon D500 is about 9 years old. I think it might even be older. The Nikon lens, the 500, is about 5 years old. The OM-1 Olympus is less than a year old and the 300mm is about 6 years old, I think. And of course, it's a DSLR in comparison to a mirrorless. And straight away, you'll have big differences there in terms of speed. The D500 does 10 frames a second, which is still very fast, and its focus is so good that virtually all those shots are in focus. In comparison, the OM-1 can do 25 frames a second or even 50 frames a second with autofocus. So, and it also is an extremely reliable autofocus. It's very quick to pick up the bird initially, as is the D500, and the OM-1 will track the bird right through the frame, and it's got subject detection, so bird eye focus, and it works really, really well. The northern shovelers are they're not big birds, but they're a good 40 centimeters, 30, 40 centimeters, so they're large enough so that it tracks right across the frame. Now, when you want to get that shot, so you want to get the correct wind position, the OM-1 definitely has the advantage because it just gets so many more shots. Now, you don't always want to use that 50 frames per second because it fills up a card incredibly quickly, but it is quite remarkable how many shots it can get in one sequence. So you might have a sequence from when the duck takes off to when it passes you, and you can have 100 frames. So you'll definitely get the wing position that you want or the angle that you want. And it's really quite remarkable how it tracks. As I said, the D500 also does a great job, but it's only 10 frames a second. So in a complete sequence, you might get 10, 20, possibly 30 shots in a sequence, whereas the OM-1, you're going to get 100. With the D500, I use group autofocus, which seemed to be the best for birds coming both towards the camera and then going across the camera. When focusing with the OM-1, I always have bird eye on, and I usually use the large box, not all, but the large box. That is great for both birds flying towards the camera and birds flying across the camera. With image stabilization, I kept it on both lenses, both setups. I did actually try with the OM-1 switching it off, and I did seem to get some pretty good shots, and I think that might require some further experimentation on that, because it's possible, but then I'm so clumsy, I always forget to switch it back on after I've done birds in flight, so therefore I'll take a picture of a static bird and it's blurry because I haven't got the IS on. So I don't know, the pictures still look great with IS on, so I think either way it works. So I'll show you a little bit of video of the environment that I was taking the shots in. It was basically a body of water next to the ocean, and the birds sort of fly from the ocean to the body of water and then to a culvert behind the body of water where they were feeding on algae. And every time people were walking along that culvert, they would fly back into this pond area, and they were flying constantly. So it was a really good opportunity to take these shots. They didn't come that close to the camera, unfortunately, but close enough to get some okay shots. And of course, I'll share some of the pictures I took this week of the ducks, but I'll also share some other pictures I've taken with both setups, purely of birds in flight. So to summarize, because I don't want to go on too long, but basically they are both fantastic setups for bird in flight. The D500 now can be picked up on the used market for a very good price. And even though the 500mm is still an expensive lens, one could pick up the 200 to 500mm used, which isn't quite as good autofocus, but it's probably as sharp or nearly as sharp, and that can also be picked up very cheap on the used market, and that would be a great setup for someone who doesn't want to blow the budget, who doesn't want to spend too much. The OM-1 is still a lot cheaper than the other competitors that share its speed and autofocus capability, so I think it's a very good deal. The 300mm can be picked up on the used market, not cheap, but basically those two can be had for quite a good price if you're comparing to the top of the line Canons and Nikons that can do similar things. So both are fantastic setups for photographing birds in flight. I really recommend both of them. I don't want to say which is better. They are both great, and the images that come out of both of these setups looks fantastic. Okay, so I hope this helps for people who are trying to make a decision. You couldn't go wrong. You won't go wrong either way. Okay, thanks for watching. Please enjoy the pictures. Please subscribe, and see you on the next one. Bye. So here's the lake. Now, it's low tide at the moment, so the ducks are at the end of the lake over here. There's a road, and then you've got the ocean, and sometimes they'll come into this area here as well, and there's one duck there, and they love the culvert behind, which is here, and it's very shallow, and they like feeding in this. So every time someone walks down here, especially kids coming to and fro from school, the birds will fly from here over to here, and they will wait over there, and then maybe 10-15 minutes later, depending on, they will then fly back here. And I usually stand a little bit further down there, and I want this greenery here as my background. Now it's too bright now, the sunshine, but when the light gets better, that can make a nice background. But you're dealing with, basically they start there and they stay low, and then when they get to about here they go high, and I don't want the sky as my background, I want the green as my background. So rather than music, I'll just talk you through some of the pictures I took at this location. So this is the female shoveler, and this was actually flying across me from left to right, so it wasn't actually in front of those trees I pointed in the video. And this was with the Olympus, and this was f4 at 1/2500 of a second, ISO 1600. And I had this image in mind. I wanted to have a light background because of the female doesn't have so many colors, and I thought it would be quite a nice soft looking image with the bird similar colors to the background, but still enough contrast to stand out. And I kind of like this image. It's not the sharpest, but I just think the picture works. I like the wing position, and this is the female Northern Shoveler. Here's the much more colourful male Northern Shoveler, and you can see that lovely green and blue in the head. Again, he was flying actually kind of parallel to me, and this is where he was in front of those trees. And out of all the many shots in the sequence, I liked the background here. This was with the D500 with the 500mm f5.6 PF, and this was at 1/2500th of a second, f5.6, which was wide open, ISO 4000. Again, kind of soft image, but not soft image, it's sharp, but it's just, you know, everything blends quite nicely. There's no harsh background or shadows or anything. So again, I think this works quite well. Again, the camera followed the bird really well, but you're only getting 10 frames a second in contrast to the OM-1 where you're getting way more. So there was a Eurasian widgeon amongst the Northern Shovelers, just this one bird, and I just wanted to show the colours of the bird. I don't like the background here. He was too close to the background, so therefore it's a bit distracting in my opinion, and the light was such that all the lighter leaves were reflecting the sun and the darker leaves were leaving shadows, so it was a kind of a cluttered background. But I think the image works okay because the bird is so beautiful. And this was with the Olympus, and it was f4 1/2500 ISO 1600. So far these three shots have all been 2500th of a second. But this is an example of when the bird is a bit too close to the background, it is more cluttered. If the bird had been close to the camera and the background further away, it would have been a more diffused background and therefore a more pleasing image. And here's another male shoveler, and this was flying more towards the camera, not across. And this was timing was key to get that background. This was with the Olympus again. It was f4 wide open. I'm always wide open when I'm doing flight shots. 2000th of a second, slightly 0.3 exposure compensation plus to lighten the background, and then ISO 500. The light was better here. And again, not an amazing shot, but I like the background, and it, as I said, it was flying towards me rather than across me. So I think I'll just show those pictures from that location because they're all kind of samey. I had loads and loads of pictures I could have shown, they're all kind of samey. And now I will put some pictures up taken in the past with these two setups. Now I've only had the Olympus 300mm for just over 2 months, so I haven't used it anywhere near as long as I used the D500. So still I'm practicing and trying different settings, but they're both really great setups. I always go for the Olympus because I'm now comfortable with it, it's lighter, but they both do a great job. So please enjoy the photos. If you like the video, please consider subscribing and liking it and doing all that other stuff. And thanks so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of the photos.